everyone, I am Savnik and I'm the co-founder and CEO at WorqHat. Now, essentially at WorqHat, what we help you do is we make sure that you can build any kind of applications without or with absolute near zero dev time so that you don't have to spend a lot of time coding stuff and writing all of those complex backend code, building out those database schemas and all of those things. We initially started with building our own language models. And now we are extending that language models use case to help people and companies build complex applications without writing any code. So that is what we essentially work with right now. And today what we'll mostly run through is, how we as a person myself, I personally end up getting a lot of newsletters taken. On my email, I get say hundreds of newsletters every week. Now, it does make it harder for me to keep a track of everything that's happening in the AI space and everything that's happening in the startup space and everything. So what I wanted to build, and I think it's a use case for a lot as well, that what if we could redirect all our emails or redirect the newsletter mails that we get to an application which stores all these emails, which creates a summary out of these content that we have, and then we use this content to create a detailed summary at the end of the week, and we receive an email with all the summaries and all the emails that we have received over the period. What we can also do is we can also create a React UI, and we can create function calls to the workflows, and these workflows will return back all the data as well. So this means that I can essentially query how many days data I want to see over a period of time. So for this, we'll be using WorqHat's workflows. Now, what are workflows essentially? Workflows are visual-based backend editors where you can go ahead and build any sort of backend. You can add in any sort of backend functionality that you want. And once you build out those backend functionalities, what you can essentially do is you can go out there, you can go ahead and plug it into applications. So it takes away that entire process where you have to build your own Node.js backend. You have to look at scalability. You need to look at how you handle multiple parallel processes happening together, and you just work in a plug and play process. So we give you inbuilt databases. The databases are built on top of some of the fastest schemas and the fastest structured OLAP databases. And we also give you the entire backend as a visual editor to build on top of it. So what we'll essentially build right now is we'll be building a newsletter summarizer tool. Now, what does newsletter summarizer tool do? This newsletter summarizer tool will essentially receive, or we'll create a WorqHat workflows mail receiver server, and this will receive the emails from our particular mailbox. So it's your Gmail mailbox or any mailbox that you have. You will receive that email over there. It will generate a specific summary from the email that I've gotten, because these emails are generally large. You look at any newsletter email, you look at any incoming product update email or stuff like that. They're generally pretty lengthy. All right. So what we'll do is we'll generate a summary and we'll store that data into a database. That is part one. In part two, what we'll do is, as I mentioned, what if I could get an email on every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. So we'll create another workflow which runs every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. It will fetch all the summaries for that week and create a master summary out of it. And then we can store the master summary in the database as well. And my third function or my third workflow is going to be a function that is going to fetch all the content for that particular week or any time duration you can and you want to specify. We take that time duration, we take that content, and then we'll fetch the summary for that particular week. And then we'll combine all this data together into a JSON, and then we'll send it to the newsletter app frontend. So this is what we'll be working on with. So if we have to look at all the content that we might have to create, we will first be creating, say, workflow for receiving the email. So this is the first workflow. We will create a workflow which will act as a time-based or a cron job. This will be the second workflow. And the third workflow is going to be the workflow that will fetch both summary data and original email data and send it to the UI. Now coming to the databases that we need to create, if we look at it over here, we are creating two databases. One database is actually storing the mail and the summary into a particular DB. That is one we have to create. And another is storing the master summary. Okay, so we will be requiring two databases. So again, the first database or the table, first table is going to be for storing individual email and summary. And second table is going to be for storing, I'll be storing, say, the combined summary that is being sent to the user. Sorry, sent to the. In this, what we can add on is we can try and create some PDF files, we can try and create some reports, we can also customize an email that can be sent to you. We'll look into all the ways in which we can build out a complete application, and all of it will not require the functionality of building a backend. Essentially, when we talk about WorqHat as a being, a large part of WorqHat itself is run by some of the core components of WorqHat itself. All right. So we have been building a lot of backends on WorqHat workflows itself and then plugging it into the application itself. So this has been capable of handling up to 100,000 and 200,000 requests every minute. So that is the capability that we have worked with so far. And the fact that if you wanted to write the backend code to do all of this, you would not only have to go ahead and create a mail server receiver, you might have to configure your own receiving server. Then you might have to go ahead and set up a cron job yourself, not to mention all the async await functions and the functions that you might have to write for it. And then you have to again configure a Postgres database or any NoSQL database you want to build on top of. You need to configure that database and then you need to go ahead and write 3-4 functions to fetch that data again. So what WorqHat essentially helps you do is it takes away that entire load of creating so many functions so that you can actually focus on building and shipping the product, because for everyone it's very important that to ship a product and to ship it fast. So that is what we'll do. And I'll try to finish it off as fast as we can, because essentially workflows helps you save a lot of time. So we'll focus on all of this as we move ahead. Now, what we'll do is I'll initially start with the sign up process, how you can get started with workflows, what's the process, how you can do it. So what you can essentially do is you can click on start for free. And once you click on start for free, you need to sign in. So I'll sign in with my personal account. Once my account is authenticated, I will go ahead and open up my most recent page, or I can go ahead and create a new organization itself. So what does creating a new organization essentially mean? Whenever you're building anything on WorqHat, we have a tendency to separate everything out into different containers. So your data and say your partner's data or some other organization is building something else on the application itself, all of your data gets segregated out between people. So there's no chance of, the same data getting mixed and, say you are using a particular language model, you're using a particular WorqHat language model. So there's no confusion, there's no mixture, or there's no chance that your data is going to be used for someone else's data set training and stuff like that. So we take security very, very seriously. And that is how we have worked on. We want to help communities build faster, build products faster. So I'll create a new organization and I have to wait for something. So this is done. Now, what we'll do is we'll get started with creating our own workflow. So to get started with creating a workflow, click on create workflows. Now, this is where you can go ahead and start building your own workflows, start building your own backend as a service using a visual editor. So first, let's do one thing. Let's first start with building our own workflows. Two workflows, one workflow that will receive an email and that will process that email. So if we go back to the drawing board that we have, this is what we'll start working with right now, the workflow for receiving that email. So let's go through how the process was. It will receive an email, it will generate a summary, and it will store it in the DB. That is what the process is. Okay, so let's go ahead and build it out. So what we'll do is we will create a new workflow. And in order to create a new workflow, let's create it as mail server workflow. All right. And then I'll have to select a type. So this is going to be an email based type. What an email based type? It's a smart mailbox. this workflows are going to get triggered when you send a particular email. You know, say you get an email from, say in this case, we are sending an email from ourselves to the workflow to, start processing. This emails can come from anywhere. You can also set up auto redirects on your mailbox. This is something that we'll cover in some other demo project in some other time. But as of now, what we'll do is we'll send the emails manually. So I'll select an email-based workflow. We are also working on a system where you can actually describe what kind of backend you want to build, and we build out the entire backend for you. But we'll skip that for now. All right, so I'll do is I'll create the workflow and I'll be redirected. So yeah, this is what your original opening screen looks like initially. All right. So this is the email trigger. Now, how do you get the email address where you need to send your email? So this is the receiving email that you need to start working with. So what I can do is I'll copy this over here for later usage. And now my first thing that I need to do, again, moving back to the drawing board, the first thing that I need to do is as soon as my mail is received, I need to generate a summary. Now generate summaries are mostly done by AI models. Okay. So what we'll do is I'll create a text gen AI model. I'll select a text generation AI model. I'll place it over here and connect it. Now what I can do is I can set up what kind of summary I want. So I want you to create a very concise summary of the email that I have received. The email content is as follows. Now, we can actually guide the model to return back data in the form of, say, JSON objects as well. So in this case, I would like to fetch both the summary and I would also like to know who my sender was. Since I'll be forwarding these emails myself, the sender won't be available. But I want to identify the senders as well. So I'll add that over here as well. I want a summary and identify the sender as well. Alright. And I'll then pass the mail content as a variable over here. So I'll select the mail content and my mail content is my text message. So this is the mail content that I want to work with. I'll set the variable to be high and I can set the output content as I mentioned. We can set the output content as JSON. Alright. Now what kind of JSON do I want? First, I need a summary. What is my summary going to be? Essentially, the summary of the mail content. And I also want to store the sender name. What is my sender name going to be? The name of the person or organization sending me the email. Alright, so this is done. So I have two elements available over here. In case I want to add some training data to this process, I want to add some files, some images, some videos, or even some audio files, I can do that as well. But that is not a part of this scope. So maybe we can go ahead to the next steps. So I'll save the changes. I'll click save over here to make sure my changes are persisting. Now, I need to store this data in a database. Alright. So what I need to do is I need to store this data in a database. So I'll select the add new data option. Right. I'll click on the add new data option and I will start saving it. So where can I store it? Okay, I don't have a database or I don't have a table created right now. So first I need to start with creating a table. Alright, so how you go ahead and do it is I'll go ahead and create my first table. So my database does not exist, create database. Right, so now I need to go ahead and create a new table. So my first table, okay, now let's see what we had planned earlier. So my first table was going to be about storing individual emails and summaries. Alright, so what I'll do, I'll name this mail table just for the sake of it. Now, what does this mail table, what is the data I want to store in this mail table? I want to store the original content. I want to store the original content. Alright, I want to store the summary. I want to store the summary. Alright, and I also want to store your sender name as we had seen earlier. So I want to store the sender name as well. Alright, this is the data I want to store over here. Now I'll go ahead and create the table. my table has been created successfully. Alright. Now once my table is created, as of now my data is empty. So what is the document ID? Since we follow more of a NoSQL format works in an OLAP structure, we always have to identify every data in the form of a document ID. And also we have atomic operations which always keep updating when was the data added and when was the last time it was updated. So that is something we keep calculating on our own. So you don't have to store it separately. Alright. Apart from that, as I mentioned, we can store original content, we can store the summary, and we can store the sender name as well. This is what we are going to be working with as of now with this table. So let's move back to our mail server workflow. Now what I can do is, now that I have a collection ready with me, I can add that collection over here. What is the document ID? As I mentioned, document ID is something that helps us keep a track of which data has been added to the table. You can think of it in terms of something like a primary key, just that having a document ID helps us keep a track of what data you have added. So in case you have added the same document ID multiple times, we will update the data in your database for that particular document. For safer side, you can choose to avoid adding a document ID. That helps us make sure that none of your data gets replaced or updated with by mistake. So we'll keep it empty for now. Now the data I need to store first is original content. So my original content is essentially going to be the text message that I've gotten, the text version of the HTML message that I've gotten, just a correction over there. Then I want to store the summary. The summary is coming from text generation and content the summary. So earlier, if you remember, I had created JSON out of the output format that I wanted. So I can create a content the summary, and I can also go ahead, add a data, and I can set my sender name. So this is going to be the sender name, and I'll save changes. All right. So going back to our drawing board once again, what was there? First, we wanted to act as a mail receiver. We wanted to generate a summary, and then we wanted to store it into a database. That is what we wanted to work with. All right. So this part of it is done. Now what I can do is I'll add a return node as well, because no function is completed without a return statement. So we'll add a return node over here, and we'll click on save changes. All right. I'll enable this as well so that it starts working. Now, time to test. How do I test it out? What I'll do is I'll open up my mailbox. I'll find some email which we can, forward it over here. And once we have that email, we'll try and see how that email has been summarized and what has come out over here. Alright, so that is what we'll work with. So let's do this. I'll open up my email address. And maybe I'll just select a random email. So this is letter. I'll take promotions. This is where I can get it. So I'll take NVIDIA inception. So this is some content that I have over here. What I'll do is I'll go back to the workflow. I'll copy the email address because I'm again forwarding the email address out here. So I'll copy the email address and I'll forward the email to my email address. Forward it to my email. I'll take away the part of it and click on send. Okay, so one email is out. I'll have another email sent. So maybe I can select yeah, I can select Harry Potter fan club. No, this is very empty, so I won't select this. Harry Potter guys, thumbs up in the comment please. Cheers. I can select let's do blockchain. Let's pick up any email. I'll take this, I'll forward it, and I'll send the recipient again. And send. Now what we need to do is we just need to wait for the data to show up. So let's wait for some time. So after waiting for around 5 minutes, we can see that the data starts processing it. The reason why it takes a bit of time to, go ahead and process your data is because every time you send an email or every time you go ahead and, um, process some data, a separate container or a compute environment is created for you every time. So spinning up this compute environment takes a bit of time. So that is the reason why it takes, say, around 1 to 2 minutes to work things out and to store the data. Now that you can see is I have the original content with me, and I also have the summary, and I have the sender name as well, the person who has sent the email. So moving back to our drawing board, step 1 of building is done. So I'll add a tick mark over here, and let's be happy, step 1 is done. Now what we'll do is we'll start working with step 2. Alright, so what is my step 2 going to be? I need a cron job that runs every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. and this will fetch all the summaries and then create a master summary out of it, and then it will store all the master summary in the DB. Over here, what will work is we'll work with variables. I think as developers, most of us who have learned a bit of coding in our past few years know that we can use a single variable to store a data over a multiple of types. Say we have a particular data and we keep appending data to it. So that is what we'll be using over here. Now, if you had to do this programmatically, that would have taken a lot of time. But since we do the heavy lifting for you, here we go. All right. So what I'll do is I'll create a new workflow. Now this is going to be my summarizer workflow. Create new summary workflow. And this is going to be a time-based trigger. And I create the workflow. Now I need to set when this workflow should run. Now this workflow should run, say every Sunday at 10 a.m. I'll check the trigger if it's right or not. So right, every Sunday at 10 a.m. and I'll save the changes. Now, what we need to do? We need to go ahead and first fetch the data from the database. So what I'll do is I'll fetch data. I'll add the fetch data function. And over here is going to be fetch all documents. I'll try to fetch all the documents. Alright. Or let's not do a fetch document over here. Since fetch will fetch all the data, let's run a query. Because I need the last 2-3 days data or the last 7 days data. So let's run a data query over here. Alright. Basic difference between fetch and query. Fetch is when you want to fetch all the documents that you have in your database or in your table, and query is when you want to fetch data based on a particular query or based on when it matches particular parameters. That is when you run a query. Alright. So we will query the database over here, and I'll select a query type as natural language query. I'll select the take collection, so which was mail table, and I will enter the query that I want to run. So over here, the query that I want to run is fetch me the summary and the sender name for the past say 5 days or 7 days, past 7 days. Alright, I'll save changes. So this is done. I've fetched my data. Now what I can do is I can either go ahead and choose to create a PDF document out of it. That is one thing I can do. I can also go ahead and first create a summary of it, and then I want to send an email to me with all the data and the summaries with it. So maybe that is what we'll work with right now. Alright. So first what we need to do, we need to first go ahead and summarize the data. But if you notice how queries work, so when you run a particular query, I'll just run a small diagram over here. So when you run a particular query, the data generally comes in the form of an JSON. Now this JSON will contain your data in it. Say you have summary and you have your sender name. So this is how the data is going to come. But when you're querying data, you're going to have multiple data that is going to come. So essentially it ends up becoming an array or a group of data that comes together at the same point of time. So essentially your structure ends up looking something like this. Summary 2, and then you get sender name 2, and so on. It keeps going on depending on the number of say the elements that come out from the database. So how do you handle grouped structures like this? You end up running a loop over it, which means that until unless the data in your array is completed, it will keep going on and on in order to append it to a particular variable. So that is what we'll try to implement over here. Alright, so what I'll do is I will go ahead, create a variable over here, and this variable can be group summary, and this will have an initial value of group summary, and then I'll add a group summary, and then I'll add the data to this. Now I need to run a loop on top of it. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll select the loop process, and once I have the loop process in it, I need to start selecting what I want to loop on top of. Now variable I want to iterate over my query data. I want to iterate over my data, and I can also set a maximum limit how many times I want to iterate. This is to make sure that you don't end up moving into an infinite loop and it keeps going on and on, thus taking a huge amount of the billing. So make sure that you set a maximum iteration which is approximated to what your data size is going to be. You can set it to be 100, 200, any number, but make sure that you set a maximum limit to how many times you want it to run. Now I'll click on the save changes. Now, once this is done, what I need to do is I need to update my variable to store the newer data. So I'll pull the handle variable node over here and I'll just expand this so that it fits in. Now what does this handle variable node do? This handle variable node will modify the variable that I have. So I have a group summary over here. Now I want to append the summary that I have created. I want to append it to the existing variable that I have. So I'll take the group summary and then I want to append the new summary that I have. So I'll take summary and I'll take query data and data or summary and then the sender name. And this is going to be query data, data or sender. Alright, so what it will do, it will essentially go on to append data to group summary. If you look at this in a diagrammatic way, what essentially happens is, say over here you have group summary and I am adding the new data to this. So I am adding the new data to this. So initially when we started, this was going to be group summary was equal to group summary. It was holding its original value. Group summary was equal to group summary. It was holding its original value. Now that I have run it into my first loop, it will hold group summary plus the new data. Alright. Now when my second loop is run, it will store group summary plus new data plus new data. So it keeps adding newer data, appending newer data to the existing data that you have. That is the reason why I have passed group summary over here as an initial variable. If I did not do this, what would have happened? It would have replaced the existing variable, it would have replaced the existing content in the variable, and it would not have appended it to the current data that you have. Alright, so I'll go ahead, click on save changes. And now that my data is created, I want to create a summary out of it. So in order to go ahead and create a summary, what I'll do is I'll find my AI node again. Yep, the text generation node. I'll take it. I'll create the text generation node over here. And I'll go ahead and say, you have been passed the summary for multiple newsletters and their senders. I need you to create a detailed summary from all of it so that I know what I have missed over the week. Alright, so this is done and I'll pass the input as well. I'll pass group summary again. I will go click on the variables and I'll select group summary. So this part is done. Right now, I want the output to be only in text content because I don't want to store anything else. Go ahead and have multiple outputs coming out of it. So I need a single output which needs to be content, and I will just work with it. So I'm not changing it to be a JSON type. What I'll do, I'll increase my randomness. What is randomness? It is how flexible you want the model to be when it's answering your questions or when it's working on building out the content for you. Higher the randomness, higher the flexibility for the model that you have. Alright. So I'll click on save changes. And then what I need to do, I need to add this data to my database. Now, if we look at our last diagram that we had, we wanted to create a second table for storing the combined summary. Alright. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and create the second database that we want to build. And I'll go ahead and create a new database again, create table and create new table. This is going to be my summary table. This is going to be my summary table and this is just going to store the summary. I don't want to store anything else. What I can also store is when was this summary created, but that is already handled by us by default using the created and the updated field. So you don't have to think about how you can build it out. So you can just go ahead and store the summary. In case there's any other data you would have liked to store over here, you're always free to store that, whatever you want to store it over here. So I click on save changes. My database is created. I'll go ahead and click on summary table. It's empty as of now. Now moving back to a summary workflow, I will add the data to my database. So kids, always remember to save your workflows because we do keep on running optimization process every time you go ahead and create a workflow. We want to make sure that your functions are always optimized, always ready to work at the fastest speed possible. So we always end up choosing the best possible configuration to host, or best possible compute to host the workflows and the runners, so that is always fast. All right. So please keep saving data as and when you make changes to it. So what I'll do is I'll click the summary table and I want to store the data. So I just need to store the summary over here. So I'll click on summary. I'll click on say output and I'll select content. And once I've done this, I'll click on save changes. This is done. My data is created. The thing is, we are always here to support you. Irrespective of what you're trying to build, what you're trying to do, we are always here to support you to help you build stuff. So that is what we work with. All right. Now, once I've added the new data, I just want to send a return just to say, my flow has completed processing and I'm good to go. So I click on save changes and I'll click on test flow. I'll start testing it now. I'll shift to the developer mode because I want to get more control over what data is being fetched. Now, if you notice, every time you run a workflow, we allocate an execution runner to. This is the compute I was talking to you about. This is the data. This is the process where we create an execution runner for you, separate it out so that you get maximum speed and maximum quality. So, successfully fetched your document, fetch me summary and sender name, past event is. So it has fetched both the document, but it has not run the loop process. That is because I haven't connected it. I need to connect the loop process. I'll save changes and I'll test flow again and I'll test it. Just took a bit longer, but it's okay. It's always going to be under 4 seconds. So I have executed the query. Now that I've started looping through the iterations, looping through the entire process. You can make this easier. You can just go ahead and see in this data output itself, or if you want to go deeper into what's being processed on the backend, you can actually go out and see what's the summary that's coming out. So this is my first summary. This is my second summary. All right. And I've run the iteration. So this is my first iteration that has been completed. And this is my second iteration that's been completed. And this is the entire summary of the newsletters that I have. So it has created a summary of the newsletters that we have, added to the database, and it has created the output, and we have actually gone ahead and completed the workflow. Next, what we can do is we can go ahead and check if the data has been stored in my summary table or not. So I'll hit a refresh over here, and my summary is here already. So we have completed 3 parts of how we can go ahead and build an application or build a backend, a complete backend with WorqHat. So we have completed this entire part. All right. So I think this is also a win. So it's another W in the bag. So maybe I'll just add a check mark over here. No, I was just going to add a heart because of all the love you guys have given us for the product. And we have been building it for quite some time now, and we can't wait to see how you use WorqHat, honestly. We just want to make building products easier and easier and easier as much as we can for you. All right. So moving ahead, I could have run this. I could have done this as a speed run myself, and complete the entire thing in 10 minutes. Maybe we can go ahead and try and do a speed run. I'll have some of my teammates sit parallel to me, and we'll pick up a project and we'll try to build it side by side. That is what we can go ahead and try doing, and you will be able to see how easier it is to go ahead and build with workflows rather than going ahead and building with code. All right, so that is what we will start working with. Maybe that can be a second video. Now, as of now, let's just stick to building it with workflows. So this is my done. My entire work is done. Now what I can do is I'll not create the front end right now. What I'll do is I'll create the REST API function that can help me fetch this data. And then you can plug it into any front end that we have. I'll show you how a front end call would look like in this scenario. All right. You don't have to worry about that. I'll show you. I'll show you how to do it. So going out here, I will create another workflow, which will be mostly responsible for. Also, this has a good running time. 6 workflows have been active as of now. So this summary workflow has run twice today because I called it twice, and this workflow has run 4 times. Yeah, the first one and the second one. So 4 times. So what I'll do is I'll create a third workflow, and the third workflow is going to be about how we go ahead and add it to our database. So for that, I'll go ahead and create a fetch workflow. Sorry, how do we go ahead and fetch the data to show it in our UI? So this will be a fetch workflow, and this is going to be URL based. What is a URL based workflow? It is where you have a endpoint where you send a request, and once the server receives this request, it processes that whatever instructions you have given it. Think of it in terms of an instruction follow. It follows the instructions that you have given it and runs the data, gets the data from there, and it creates a backend for you completely. Alright. So it's a URL based request. Send a request to a URL and it will start processing itself. So I'll create the workflow, and when I have the REST API workflow with me, what I can do is first I'll have to run 2 query functions over here. The reason why I need to run 2 query functions over here is I want to fetch all the content for the week and I want to fetch the summary for the week as well. Alright. So what I'll do is I'll have 2 query functions added over here. So I'll add 2 query functions side by side. Query data. And I'll connect this. I will connect this as well. And this. Now what data do I want to fetch from the user? Say I want to fetch a data called, say, query. Let's give the user or your customer the flexibility to set. Let's give your customers the flexibility to set how many days data they want to fetch from the database. So let's give them the flexibility. So I'll take the query from the user itself and then we'll query the data. Again, I'll go for natural language query. You can actually set queries on your own manually as well. But the thing is, when you're running short on time, you want to do things fast and you want to do things perfectly. It's always easier to go for the natural language approach. And I can tell you, I can promise you that we have some of the best models in the market as of now, right? As of date. We have built it on top of some of the best open source models of Falcon and Llama. And all of these models have been extended to have a lot of enterprise use cases that has been trained completely on the database structure that we have. And it is also most suitable towards enterprise level work rather than a generalistic model. So that is what we mostly depend on top of. Alright. So again, I'll go for a natural language query. I'll select the table. So this is going to be a mail table and this query is just going to be the user query that we have gotten. So save changes. I'll also do the same thing over here. Natural language query, but this is going to be my summary table. I want to fetch the summaries as well. And I'll again save the changes to REST API trigger and query. Save changes. Now, when I'm sending back a return, my return statement will contain not only the data from my summary table, but will also contain the data from my, the mail table as well. So I'll click on add parameter. I'll declare mail table as a variable and I will set the variable to be query data dot data. Alright. I'll also add a parameter which calls it as summary table and this is going to be query data dot data again. So I'll save the changes. I'll save changes again and now I'll test it. What is my query? My query is going to be, say, data for the past 2 days. And I'll try and test this. So it has started running. Look at it. It has executed the query. So right, it has fetched me the original content as well, which I don't need honestly, but it's okay. And it has sent all the data to the user. So I did not need all this data, but it's okay. I've sent the summary. I've sent the some mail table has a summary and it has sent one data. It's over here. And my summary table has 2 data. Maybe I've mixed things up, but that's more or less it. So this is how it works. This is how you can go ahead and create a complete backend in 2 seconds. This function exactly took me 2 minutes to build. Whereas if you had to write the query, it would have taken you quite a lot of time. Go ahead, create a drizzle ORM, configure that, run the migration on your Drizzle or your Prisma IE. Then you go ahead and write the SQL queries, and you write and check if they are indexed or not. A lot of things to do. This takes 2 minutes. All right. I'll just check the queries if I've gotten them wrong. So this is the summary table. My second, acha, query data 2 is my summary table, and this is the this table. Right. So that's the reason why the data got mixed up. So essentially, query data 2 is my summary table. So query data 2 is my summary table. So I'll just shift things a bit. Query data 2 is my summary table, and this is my main table. Now it should work perfectly. Test flow. Test now. So I'll just wait till this runs, and maybe we can call it a day. Right. So my mail table has all the mail data that I wanted. I can show it over here. And my summary table has all, I'll just switch off some table. So my mail table has an object. Now the reason why it has one object is because it has one data. And my mail table has two objects. The reason was because it has two data. You can go deeper into what data is there in it, and you can see that this was the data that got returned in the return state. So that is how we help you build any kind of complex project, any kind of product you want to build without going into the complexities of going ahead and building out your own database, provisioning your database servers, selecting which model to use. We always select the best model at the back end to make things work. All right. And it makes things easier for you. It makes things way, way, way easier for you to build. And maybe it's time to call it a day. It has been a pretty long video, and I can't wait to see you guys again in the next video. And maybe the next video is something that might be a bit of fun for you. What we'll do is we'll try and do a speed run where we select a particular topic, and one of my teammates tries to build it using a coding environment, and I can go ahead and build it using the no code, and we can see who of us builds things faster. All right, maybe we can run a public vote on it on how who does it better. So till then, see you guys, and I can't wait to see what you build with WorqHat AI. And till then, good day. Cheers.